Henry Steele Commager reminds us that historically Americans have been the people most tolerant of, indeed enthusiastic about change. To cling to the past or to try to preserve the status quo intact is to go backward. Change does not assure progress, but progress implacably requires change.
In the early 1960s, Ball State Teachers College aimed to be a more prominent and independent institution. Administrators at the college created their own board of trustees, allowing them to separate the college's governance from Indiana State in 1961. On February 8, 1965, Governor Roger Brannigan signed the bill granting Ball State status as an official university, initiating new facilities, housing options, and offices for faculty and students. John R. Emmons, the university's sixth president, grew the campus from 5,027 students to 13,524 students during his tenure, sending Ball State University into its largest expansion in history.
I don't think that the emerging universities are being given a fair share of support for higher education, not because of any deep-dyed plot or any sinister motivation or any purposeful activity on anybody's part, but merely because the American people still don't realize how important they are to them. I think the significance of the emerging institution is still not fully realized by most Americans.
While many white students were excited about Ball State's growth, Black students did not have the same opportunities to take part in the university's development due to the lack of housing and space for the Black community. This led many students of color to seek out a better alternative. The lack of a community space for Black students on campus led them to search for off-campus housing. This caught the attention of the university's administration, forcing them to address the much larger issue of race.
As a result of being a small group on a predominantly white campus, we naturally gravitated to each other. And doing that, we sort of insulated ourselves when it came to addressing different needs or situations or issues. We were able to actually name every African American student on campus. We knew them all, which tells you there weren't that many. We knew them all. We could name every African American student on campus. That created a situation where the university started to evolve and started to expand and grow in a lot of ways.
At the time, Muncie's neighborhoods were segregated due to redlining and decades of exclusionary neighborhood covenant language. This began to change in the late 1960s, yet Black students on campus continued to face housing discrimination off campus as they pursued their education.
As I was looking at these multiple sheets of paper and about to leave the housing office, I'm not exactly sure, I don't remember the gentleman's name, but he said to me, "Here, let me have that list back." And he handed me a second list. And he said, "Look, disregard the first list. If you go to any of those, they're close to campus, but you'll probably be insulted. Let me give you another list of housing that's located out in the African American community." And so I took that list and found a couple of places that I thought were fairly close, and I made inquiries there.
Although students of color were allowed to live on campus, many opted to live with Muncie community members in the predominantly African American neighborhoods of Whiteley and Industry.
The Muncie community and the Ball State environment were all dealing with society in transition. The whole world was dealing with society in transition. And the whole world did not have answers. So it was sort of naive on the part of us to think that Ball State was ready for these massive changes. At the same time, we came in with a level of expectations that were brought from traditionally urban areas into Middletown that were probably not reasonable at the same time also.
While Black students found ways to deal with the housing problem, the true solution was missing. Many students were upset by the lack of action from the school administration and wanted change, so they protested.
They were recognizing the 50th anniversary of John R. Emmons, and it was over in Emmons Auditorium, and it was being televised within Indiana. We had approached the administration about some things that we felt that were important. One of them was what we called a Black House at that point, but it really is more of a special programs house, more teachers who were responsive to Black students. We were not really getting the responses that we felt were appropriate. And again, a lot of that was being handled by Dean Kenneth Collier. Our thought was that we're not going to really get the response that we need unless we try alternative means. So during this address and this recognition process, we put 2 students in the middle of every row in Emmons Auditorium, every row. And when John R. Emmons rose to speak, we all stood up and exited to each end of the row, which meant that we disrupted the entire program. And we just did it quietly, no comment, left the building. There was feedback. How dare they, a lot of anger, a lot of emotion initially. But I think through that, we were able to get the ear of some people, and that began some of the dialogue that was really necessary. Disruption of John R. because everybody was there. Everybody who is anybody in education was there. They didn't know.
The administration swiftly responded by electing an ad hoc committee to assess the housing situation for Black students on campus, eventually coming to the conclusion that many were dropping out significantly earlier than other groups. Due to the poor results, the committee concluded that a director of special programs position would be essential for the upcoming fall semester. The university hired George Davis as the first director of special programs to start in the fall semester. This position would address all academically at-risk students and eventually expand drastically, becoming what is known today as Ball State's Multicultural Center.
This is Ball State University, a Midwestern institution that houses almost 15,000 students. It's typical of many universities across the country, but with one exception. They've decided that someone needs to take an interest in those students who come to college only marginally prepared. Forecasts call for this student to suffer great academic difficulty, probably fail at the end of the first term. Hoping to reverse this trend, Ball State has accepted 50 of these marginal students and extended a helping hand through the aid of an experimental program titled DECEP, the Directed Admission Student Experimental Program.
The DECEP concept is not a new one. It's merely the result of one man expanding several other ideas and molding them into one. That man is the Director of Special Programs at Ball State, George Davis.
The DECEP concept is an idea in the form of a program designed to increase the chances of academic success of our students. I tell them that in spite of what the university has said about 75 to 90% of them flunking out at the end of their freshman year, that I believe each of them can succeed after 4 years of work.
The big question now is, will these students be able to compete in regular college work? Will they be able to survive? Only time will tell.
As the year went on, many major historical events unfolded, causing many students to wake up to the injustices around them.
You know what? In our church, we grew up with two things: being encouraged and exposed to anything that was good and that could make you better, or that could broaden your experiences. So we had people who, and once Dr. King Jr. got famous, we had people all the time in there. When John F. Kennedy was assassinated, he came home to his dad. He was very shaken. And he said, "That's the way I'm going to go." He knew that was going to happen. I am not sure he knew that night either. I don't know what happened with him that night, because that speech, I was like, woo, how did he know? Was there a vision? What? But I imagine if Kennedy hadn't happened, I would have been more shaken, but it moved me to the activism part, to the support part. It did not touch me hard-wise, because it wasn't a real surprise, because their house had been blown up and all that stuff, and the FBI had been taping it and all. I knew about that stuff, so I was not surprised, but I felt the need to be there and to stand up for it. So I was there, but I remember looking back, and I had never seen that many people in my life. Just a lot of people. I don't know how they came up with the number, but I don't think it was accurate. But there were people on the street, and then there were people who were marching.
Seeing little to no change in the advocacy for Black students on campus, a group of white students and Muncie community members in the fall semester began The Only Alternative, an underground newspaper that ran from 1968 to 1971. The Only Alternative exposed readers to the realities of the Vietnam War and the Black student movements across the country, alongside subsequent protests. The paper advocating for Black students on campus created a catalyst for white allyship. The importance of white students utilizing their privileges responsibly gave the Black student movement on Ball State's campus the traction they needed to be heard. This perfect storm of advocacy in this soon-to-be nationwide newspaper fueled the fire in the Midwest to progress. In the November 1968 edition of The Only Alternative, the students published the Black Student Demand Letter.
The new president of Ball State University has regulated the responsibility but not the power to act on the problems of the Black students. We call upon the president to act now on questions plaguing the Black students and not to pass the buck down of the chain of commands to subordinates unable to handle the problems.
As George Davis began to build the community foundation for academically struggling students on campus, many Black students were left wondering what changes would actually be made to assist them due to the wide assortments of responsibilities delegated to Mr. Davis. While DASEP was addressing many academic struggles, the general student body did not mesh well with those in the program. The Black student groups had no means to establish themselves as an official group on campus, leaving Black students without a space for community. Given the Only Alternative's position on campus, George Davis was willing to speak with students in a candid conversation on how the transition was going.
When this program was first being set up, some of the Black students that found out about it expressed their opinion that the university was bringing in someone who would, in effect, neutralize their efforts that had up to that time been directed towards President Dr. Emmons and the VP of Student Affairs, Dr. Barrell. They apparently saw you as an effort to rechannel their grievances to where nothing meaningful would be done about them. For this reason, the Black students told us that you were an Uncle Tom. Do you believe that this charge has any validity?
Well, first, the job assignment strikes me as being two token kinds of things, and no one verifies this for obvious reasons, but I suspect that the person who's scheduled to take this job would have been expected to do basically none of the things that I've tried to do. No money was appropriated for the tasks that were at hand. There was no office space, no desk, no secretary, all of which reinforced my suspicion that there was very little serious consideration attached to the job's responsibility. I know that some of the black students were suspicious, and justifiably so, for the administration that had kept conditions undesirable for these students was the same administration that hired me, and administrators don't go out and purposely hire people to come in and rock the boat. I don't make a lot of noise, but frequently I speak, and generally I'm heard. There will be a lot of people who will be happy when I leave.
Mr. Davis, we're running short on time. In closing, would you attempt to tell us what you see for the future?
In December, I spent part of my Christmas vacation in the hospital suffering from hypertension. The doctor told me that 3 jobs were for 3 men. I was willing to give 4 or 5 months of unreasonably hard and tenacious work to get the program started to prove to myself and the university that these programs are worthwhile. All of them have merit and profound potential. I suspect we're at a crossroads. It is time now that the university must stand and be counted, for if the administration is not committed to the ideals of these programs, nothing further can happen of a positive nature. The university must make a decision to support the programs with its resources as well as with words.
In the 1969 spring semester, Davis brought the demand letter himself to the Human Relations Committee, emphasizing the importance of the students' demands and additional faculty and financial support to special programs. Additionally, Davis developed the African American Studies program and proposed it to the committee, establishing Ball State's first African American Studies minor. Davis's efforts led to Ball State implementing the first Black History Week in February of 1969. The student body participated in a keynote address, art show, and fashion show under the theme, The Significance of Soul. The overload of work and health issues caused by the stress of the position led Mr. Davis to his resignation in the summer of 1969. With special programs established in the Ball State community, the university looked to Dr. Robert Foster, a Muncie native and community activist, to fill the role and expand its community outreach. Hired in September of 1969, Dr. Foster was known at the time for being the first Black principal in Muncie's school district. His role in the Office of Special Programs aimed to help DASEP and continued supporting Black community on campus. Not long after, Robert Bob Cody, a varsity football player and alumni, was hired as the first Assistant Director of Special Programs in October of 1969. His role in the Office of Special Programs was faculty overseer of all prominent Black groups on campus.
There was a need for it in order to further incorporate Black students into the university setting, to involve students. Not saying that there wasn't residence hall activities and opportunities, and perhaps there were not enough of those activities on campus. You also have the backdrop of the nation and what was happening at other places. There needed to be some guidance available. There needed to be people on campus encouraging students to become involved.
With more funding and administrative support, the Office of Special Programs established and developed a rapidly expanding community for Black students on campus. Dr. Foster's first event established the Miss Black Ball State pageant.
Miss Black Ball State was a pageant program that ultimately cultivated to allow Black women to feel seen with their natural hair, with their melanated skin, with their dress, and with their identity of who they are. They were able to be celebrated and identified and honored for who they are. And so that really allowed them to just feel seen. And I think that's why it was important for Ball State to have that, because Black women were so marginalized on campus. And so I think that this allowed them to have that voice and that they can be honored and recognized for who they were.
The Black Student Union was officially recognized as a campus organization in 1969, and in 1974, the Afro-American Student Alliance was renamed Black Student Alliance. The organization established Black History Month, Miss Black Ball State, various student newspapers, and Black community spaces on and off campus. Additionally, the office helped support emerging sororal and fraternal groups on campus.
I was a member of a sorority that was called Kappa Sigma, which was a independent sorority. It was not. It was only on this campus. And so at some point in 1968, I think in November 1968, they were able to become part of the national Alpha Kappa Alpha.
I was coming out of high school in 1968. Things were very turbulent in the country. And it was like I found a safe group, a safe place to interact and be with those that have some of the same goals you do, lacking prejudices and that kind of thing that I had experience with in high school.
With such expansive growth in the midst of a year, Dr. Foster proposed an Afro-American Center for Black students on campus. The proposal was met with hesitation due to a lack of understanding from the board on the importance of an all-Black space on a predominantly white campus. Instead, the administration granted the proposed space to all underrepresented students. This proposal would become the first special programs house.
Not everybody appreciated the special programs house. There were students, let me tell you, in 1970 when that happened, who were upset, and they came and sat down and sat in the lounge of the building to let us know that they did not want a special programs house. They wanted a cultural center. I don't think that was appreciated, but I think with time the building was appreciated, even though it did not carry the name. And in writing the proposal for the building, I did not choose that particular name. I had cultural center involved in it. But the decision to work with what we had and to have a library there, which at that time was called the Malcolm X Memorial Library. We tried to show students that we did in fact care about them.
Many Black student groups were established during this period, such as Lil Sis Big Sis, Academic Opportunity Program, and Black Leadership Conference. These efforts further improved the retention of Black students on campus and utilized the Special Programs House space to do so. Foster stepped into both the director and assistant director role after Cody stepped down in 1984. Dr. Foster served in this position until 1987. During this time, Ball State reevaluated the responsibilities of both positions, concluding the assistant director role was more essential under student services, leaving the director role once again solely responsible for the entire Special Programs Office and the groups housed inside. This left many students worried and questioning what was to come. A nationwide search was underway to find the best fit for this important role.
The office was known actually among the kids as the Black House. That was their house. And it took me a long time to break up from seeing that too, but at any rate, it was their house. But those who embraced that were mostly seniors. I just had to bear that resistance for a short period. But in the process, I had to bring those sophomores, whatever juniors were left, along with me on the journey of understanding that they were not the only one and that they'd have to give that up.
Dr. Brenda Green stepped forward into the director role, bringing new energy into the office, advocating heavily for all underrepresented students to be aware of their opportunities on campus.
Again, getting them to mix, getting them to understand, because my goal was inclusivity, right? And that's what involved everybody, the community people, the campus at large. We had folks come and talk about what they did, the organizations all across.
Allowing students the space to advocate for their needs to the administration directly granted a sense of trust between the ability of the students, the newly updated Multicultural Affairs Office, and the administration to create a more inclusive environment. Dr. Green created Excel, a program to help Black students have a smoother transition into a predominantly white institution. The first LGBTQIA+ group on campus, known today as Spectrum, emerged during this time, as well as the Asian American Student Association and Native American Student Association.
We have a responsibility to prepare these students for their life, not ours. It's difficult. You have to understand. Most predominantly white institutions were set up for white kids. There's nothing wrong with that. That's what they were set up for. But you have to also understand that there has to be some adjustments now that you have students who are not white. So what the office does is to help the institution meet that particular need.
With the director position opening once again in 2000, a reevaluation of the role and the office was changed to what we know today as the Multicultural Center. Due to low staffing, the student organizations under the Multicultural Center were placed under Student Leadership and Services programs, causing a major divide in support between the center and the student groups. The students had access to the Multicultural Center as a resource, but it was no longer the vibrant and well-rounded space it had been. Many Black students voiced concerns over the university's handling of the situation, once again feeling left in the dark on where to go for support.
With my experience of being tokenized, I feel like really it's so much duality to it. I'm either looked over or they're like praising me for like the smallest things that I do.
Going to a PWI, I oftentimes felt like, I don't know, I felt like since there weren't many Black people in my classes, I felt like I had to be the example, or not the example, but I had to put forth like my best behavior so that they wouldn't think negatively about myself and about, my community.
Being a Black woman on campus means that I have to watch what I do and what I say, because I will say, I don't even really mean this to brag, that a lot of people know who I am. And because of that, I feel like I am always thinking about my next move, right? Because if somebody catches me off guard, then somebody's going to say, look at Imani. Well, maybe she isn't as great as people make her out to be. I don't think that necessarily even has to do with being a Black woman. I think it just has to do with being in a positive light all the time. I don't think I'm afforded the opportunity to be mediocre. I don't think a lot of Black people in general who are in spaces like these, in high places or in the spotlight, have the opportunity to just be average. I don't think I'm afforded that opportunity. And that's okay, I guess. But for other Black women like me who want a break, I just wish sometimes we could be normal.
Students in the original multicultural organizations were left to fend for themselves in separate offices for 20 years. While the aid of the office was still prevalent on campus, the support was drastically different. This gap created a ripple effect that current students are still facing in the 2020s. Black students knew from speaking with alumni that the foundation for their community was there. They just needed to revive it on their own terms. Seeing the historical importance the Multicultural Center had on underrepresented groups, President Jeffrey Mearns, alongside Assistant Director Bobby Steele, began planning for the new building, one large enough to house all the multicultural organizations in the center of campus. The Board of Trustees approved a $4 million budget for a new facility in May of 2018. Construction was completed in October of 2021. Granting the original student organizations access back to utilizing the Multicultural Center's facilities has sparked a revival in the community.
I hope that Black students are able to come to Ball State and have all of the kinds of unique and fulfilling and eye-opening and illuminating experiences I had without having to run themselves ragged to get there. Like, I hope that Black students in the future are able to say, yeah, I'll do a leadership role or two, but not feel the need to completely wrap their identity up in the work that they're doing, or feel the need to give themselves completely to the institution to be able to get anything back from it.
Whether it be through protests, publications, community events, or a student's presence on campus, Black students have broken the rigid and discriminatory mold of academia and formed their own communities to support and overcome the challenges of an aging academic system.
The Black experience at a PWI is a challenging one, to say the least, and it's really up to administration to find the resources or amenities or the people necessary to alleviate that stress, right? When you walk into a class and you're the only Black person there, which is my experience most of the time, you feel like you become a representative of the Black experience in general, which is unfair. It is up to faculty, it's up to the university to fill in those gaps. So the Black person and the Black student that's in that class doesn't feel the need to have all the responses. You know, I've never had this experience, but I know plenty of Black students that have this experience where a professor will be talking about something that relates to Black people, and they turn to the Black student to say, is this right? It's not the Black student's job to determine whether or not that piece of information is right or not, because Black people are not a monolith. Because there are so few of us on campus, we become representatives of the Black experience in general, which is completely unfair because not all people can discuss one particular type of experience. That's why faculty and administration have to be educated about so many different types of experiences so they can teach their students, regardless of race, about the importance of the Black experience. Black student, that doesn't have to lie on the shoulders of Black students, and it shouldn't.
Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise high as the listening skies. Let it resound loud as the rolling sea. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. Facing the rising sun of a new day begun. Let us march on till victory is won. We'll keep marching, fighting till the victory is won. Hold your head up, brothers, till the victory is won. Keep believing, sisters, till the victory is won. Till that day comes, let us march on till victory is won.